all fixed assets, current, all your debtors, bills receivable. Then partner's capital account can also have a debit balance. This will also be appearing here. Partner's loan, if the firm has given, then accumulated losses. So as we studied the treatment of all these items in partner admission retirement, we have to study the treatment of all these in dissolution as well, that what is to be done with these reserves, these assets and liabilities. Fine. But I have divided this external liabilities I have written on the top and the internal after a gap. So first of all, we are going to transfer all the liabilities to, now when I'm closing down the business, I'm closing my books, I'm closing all the ledger accounts that are open right now. Suppose today I'm closing my business. So I'm going to close all the ledger accounts that are open in my books. So I'm going to transfer. So where I'm going to transfer the balance of those ledger accounts. For liabilities, I'll transfer, for all liabilities and assets, I'll transfer the balance to realization account. So only one account is prepared for the dissolution process. That is realization account. But I'm going to transfer all liabilities except reserves. Reserves are not to be transferred. Accumulated profits are not to be transferred. Loan by partner is not to be transferred. We have just seen that loan has to be written separately. Then workman compensation reserve, to the extent of liability, will be, to the extent of liability, it will be transferred. Rest, it will not be transferred. Fine. And similarly, investment fluctuation fund reserve will be completely transferred. Now the treatment of WCR and IFR is slightly different in dissolution. I'll be explaining it right now. You can just note down, you have to transfer all liabilities except reserves, accumulated profits, loan by partner. You don't have to transfer WCR to the extent of liability. But IFR has to be completely transferred to realization account. And your journal entry will be liabilities. Now you're closing the balance carried down. You're closing the balance carried down of all the liabilities accounts which are there in your ledger. So your entry will be liabilities account debited to realization account. Liabilities, sundry I have written for all the liabilities. So it will be liabilities account debited to realization. I'm explaining it on the board, so you have to switch over to my board. Now you are given balance sheet, where you are given non-current liabilities, current liabilities, capital, reserves. That is why I divided that. Reserves, WCR, IFR. Now these will be completely transferred to realization account. All the non-current liabilities and current liabilities, they all will be transferred to realization account. So my journal entry will be, when I'm closing these liabilities, items have credit balance. When I'm closing this will become debited. So all my liabilities debited to realization. So where I'm going to post it? By sundry liabilities. Capital is not to be transferred. We have just seen we have to make 4 accounts. First, realization. Second, partner's loan. Third, capital. And fourth, cash. So we are keeping these ledger accounts open in our books. So capital is not to be transferred. Fine. Reserves. Then partner's loan also. Sorry, there was a partner's loan also. partner's loan account is also open because we are maintaining 4 ledger accounts at the time of dissolution. So I am going to keep this also open. So this will not be transferred to realization account. Whenever I'm transferring a balance to ledger account, realization account, that means I'm closing that account. So I'm not closing partner's loan and capital account. Now, what about reserves, WCR and IFR? Reserves will be distributed. General reserve, P&L account, credit balance will be distributed the same way amongst the partners. It will be divided amongst the partners. IFR, I'll explain you why later when I discuss the investments. IFR will be transferred to realization. Complete. It will be transferred to realization. Workmen compensation reserve. You will have to understand what amount of workmen compensation reserve will be transferred to realization. Suppose workmen compensation reserve is 50,000. Fine. So I have a liability. I don't have any liability. If there is no liability, fine. 50,000 becomes free reserve. 50,000 becomes free reserve, which will be distributed amongst the partners like general reserve. But if I have a liability of 20,000, then 20,000 will be transferred to, because this is the liability that I have to pay. Whatever I have to pay, I have to transfer it to realization account. So my journal entry becomes workmen compensation reserve to workmen compensation claim. Basically, I should write claim here. I have to pay claim. So this is claim. I have transferred 20,000. Remaining 30,000 will be distributed amongst the partners. And if I have a liability more than the reserve, if I have a liability of, suppose 70,000, then what should I do? Yes, then this complete, not 70,000 will be transferred, only 50,000 we cannot transfer. Now this is not same as revaluation account. You have to note down the difference here. When there is a liability of less than reserve, then I'm going to transfer the lesser amount. But if I have a liability more than the reserve, then I have to transfer only 50,000. That means I can transfer only to the extent of 50,000. That means to the extent of reserve in the realization account. Is it clear? You have to note down the difference here, because these are the points. You have done revaluation account and treatment of WCR and IFR in so many chapters that you have to note down the difference. WCR will not be transferred or distributed as it is amongst the partners, or it will not be transferred as it is to the realization account. If there is no liability, it will be transferred, it will be distributed amongst the partners. Fine? I don't have to pay anything. But if there is a claim, then the claim amount will be transferred to realization, and the balance will be distributed amongst the partners. And if your claim is more than the reserve, then you will transfer only 50,000. You will transfer only 50,000 as claim to the realization account. I'll explain you when we pay this claim, I'll explain you why I transferred only 50,000, not 70,000. Fine. I hope this is clear. The treatment of WCR is clear. Yes, Ansh, unmute and tell, is it clear? Ansh Dargan. Ansh. Arnik.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Arnik Jain.
Yes, ma'am. It is clear.
Apurv, unmute yourself and tell, is it clear? Apurv. Yes, Ishika, unmute and tell, is it clear? Ishika,
Yes, ma'am.
am I not audible? Nitesh, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. So note down the difference in the treatment of workmen compensation reserve and IFR. The treatment of IFR is also different. We are going to transfer complete investment fluctuation reserve to realization account. We are not going to distribute it amongst the partners. Let's see about the assets now quickly. Yes, we are going to transfer all assets except fictitious assets, that is the advertisement suspense account, cash and bank account, loan to a partner, then goodwill. Bhuvnesh, you are asking why if our IFR won't be distributed to partners. Just wait, I'm explaining Bhuvnesh. I'll be explaining why the workman compensation reserve and IFR. Fine. So these assets will not be transferred to realization account. Fictitious assets account, cash and bank, loan to a partner, fine, and goodwill account. Then debtors are transferred at gross value and provision is transferred to credit side of realization. Provision is transferred to credit side of realization. Just note down these points. These are very important because now you have to switch over from revaluation to realization. Just note down these points. I'll explain. This I've already explained. IFR is transferred to credit side of realization account. So for transfer of assets, it will be realization account debited to sundry assets account. We are closing the balance or the ledger accounts of all the assets except the above by transferring them to realization account. Advertisement suspense will be distributed amongst the partners. Advertisement suspense will be distributed amongst the Yes, Kunal, you're right. Goodwill. Yes, I should have written goodwill is to be transferred to realization account. Yes. Goodwill is to be transferred. Yes, children. Goodwill is to be transferred to realization account. This was the point I wanted to. It has been written as except, but goodwill is to be transferred to realization account. Debtors are transferred at gross value. Provision is transferred to credit side of realization. And IFR is transferred to credit side of realization. You can note down goodwill is to be transferred to realization account. Goodwill is to be transferred to realization account. Cash and bank will not be transferred. Loan to a partner will also not be transferred. And then we have to note down these points. Goodwill is to be transferred. Debtors are transferred at gross value. And provision is transferred to credit side of realization. And IFR is transferred along with investments to the realization account. I will take up the explanation of this tomorrow. Fine. How the assets are transferred and how they are realized and the liabilities account is settled. So that's all for today.